This is Greg Troutwine with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're very pleased to be joined again by Knut Ørbeck-Nilssen to discuss DNV's milestone 125th anniversary operating in the United States. Knut, the world certainly has seen a lot of changes during the last few years. What do you see today as the key challenges and opportunities for the maritime industry?
Thanks, Greg, for having me. And yes, there are many opportunities and challenges, as you point out, and not least, I would say, political shocks and unpredictable markets is really at the fore. But then we also have the more, say, regulatory challenges and not least the ESG revolution that is, demanding a lot of transparency and improvements from the ship operations. And then certainly the third point is really around technologies. There are so many things happening, and we could talk about digitalization, about cyber, but there's also so many initiatives around energy efficiency and how you can improve performance. So yeah, the maritime world is really in transition, and for a guy like me, that's a very interesting decade to be working in the maritime industry.
Knut, I know the topic of collaboration is a vital part in driving the transformation. And I also know that this is an issue that's very close to your heart. Do you feel that the industry is moving in the right direction?
I think there is a lot of good collaboration going on, and I think we're seeing an increase in what we call the joint development projects and joint industry projects. So there is a lot of collaboration going on within the maritime industry. I think now the real challenge is that we as an industry, we really have to reach beyond our industry borders, if you like. So if for instance, we take the challenge of the future fuels, this is largely provided by organizations and entities and even nations that are not that closely linked to the maritime industry. So that's where I see the biggest, say, challenge for the industry is not only to sort of be happy working together, we all know each other, but it's really to branch out and make those other relationships also, because they will be important. I mean, the fuels of the future will not come from within the industry, right?
Knut, as we said at the outset, DNV is celebrating 125 years in the US, which obviously is an impressive milestone. But from what you know, why did a young Norwegian classification society back in 1898 decide to cross the ocean and establish itself here in the US?
DNV has always been about, following our customers, and that's really how it also happened with sort of the establishment in the US. Our customers traded there, starting with the sailing ships naturally, and then gradually moving over to, say, the steamships and all the ships that we know of today. So it's really been about following our customer base and following the trade. And that's how it all started. And it started with, a one person, a one man operation, and he covered more or less the entire East Coast, which must have been a tremendous challenge. But, those were the days, no phones, no digitalization. So basically a lot of traveling and manual work. But for sure, after that, we really enjoyed tremendously to be part of the US and the North American cluster. And now these days, as you probably know, Greg, we have a lot of employees in the US. I believe it's more than 2,000 employees. So, moving from one person 125 years ago to where we are today, we feel really proud. But most of all, I feel it's really important for us as an organization to be closely linked with the North American cluster, because it is a very important one.
I'm sure there are many, but what do you consider to be the key highlights of DNV's long history in this country?
Yeah, since we don't have, several hours, I will try and keep it brief, Greg. But I think there are at least two very remarkable times in history that really stands out to me. One is the establishment of the cruise industry, basically out of Miami. As you know, this was more or less, worked out from a Norwegian heritage, and it was taken to the US, and it's been, really professionalized, industrialized after that. But that was, say, a major step, bringing tourism to that extent onto vessels and really combining these two industries in such a creative and innovative ways. The second one that I really sort of feel had significant impact was the Macondo incident, right? So with the Deepwater Horizon, the well that sort of was uncontrollable, and that really was a significant learning for the entire industry, the oil and gas industry, but certainly also for the maritime and not least for the drilling industry, and how, say, the industry came together to work on regulations, to work on bettering the rules and the standards, and take that learning. I thought was a really impressive collective effort spanning across, authorities and private enterprises and classification societies like DNV. So those two, say, major milestones really formed some significant impact, and it has to do with safety, right? So we are all about safety, taking care of the seafarers, taking care of the workers at the drilling rigs, and for sure making sure that the tourists on cruise vessels are safe. And I think this is quite tremendous. And maybe just a small one, building on the cruise side. So when we had COVID, we managed to pull together the expertise from the medical competence that we have in DNV with the maritime competence, and creating this infection prevention certification scheme that allowed the cruise vessels to get an early start when the no sailing instruction was relaxed. So I think these are, quite important milestones for us.
Knut, what do you consider to be the key developments from DNV in the US? And I mean by that, developments which brought benefits and innovation to the maritime customers and the stakeholders in the region.
Well, I think it's, beyond what I just mentioned as really important milestones. But I think in general, what we see is that there are so many things that happen throughout the maritime world, right? And through the work that we are doing, we are able to share a lot of that experience and knowledge building with customers and stakeholders everywhere. If I just could mention one example, I think really what we do on the maritime forecast, that is so important, to try. I mean, nobody can see what the future will bring, but that we try to bring at least some visibility into the different optionalities that exists. And I think for us to share that experience with the North American shipping cluster is really important. And of course, every region, every continent has its own characteristics, right? And I think in the US and in Canada in particular, there are many, many opportunities to sort of adapt to this new environment of decarbonization, and also create, opportunities for new businesses as this develops. So yeah, I really thrive on the creative spirit in North America. I think that is really, really inspiring.
We've just looked at the past. Why don't we take a turn and look at the future? As you and I have discussed many times, we're in the midst of a transcendent period in maritime, with many major simultaneous trends reshaping this industry as we speak. What does the future hold for DNV in the US? And what trends or changes do you anticipate for the maritime industry in the coming 5 years?
Thanks for that question. I think there are several things that I could bring forward, but I think I will limit myself to specific topics. I talked initially about the ESG revolution, right? So it's not just about regulatory compliance when it comes to CO2 emissions and other emissions. It's also about, customer expectations, end user expectations, finance expectations, etc. And I think the fact that, companies and ship owners and charterers will more and more have to, say, measure their performance and improvements on emissions, that is going to be so important going forward. And I'm very happy to say that we will, during Q2 this year, launch a very relevant product called Emissions Connect, and it will help all the stakeholders to really get a grip on their emissions, not only on a yearly basis, but also on a, say, per leg or per journey, per vessel, per fleet. So it's really going to be a helpful tool. And then my second point will be that, in a world where geopolitical tensions are increasing and we are getting more and more reliant on digital tools, cybersecurity and resilience in that respect is really important. And, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And also in DNV, we experienced a cyber attack recently. So it's really a question about how can you make sure that you are resilient enough to withstand such a attack, whether it's ransomware or phishing or whatever it is, and really, be resilient and continue operations without damage. And I think that are two really important things that we need to work with our customers and stakeholders on: ESG revolution and the cyber resilience.
Okay, well, Knut, as always, many, many topics for us to talk about in the future. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you and the DNV team at CMA in Stamford later next month.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Looking forward to that too. Take care.